Hello, hello, hello! Welcome, salutations, greetings, konnichiwa, and every other form of greeting across this vast, wonderful multiverse. I am Matsuquinox, this is Horace, and welcome to the study. How is everyone this fine night? Oh, hello, Dr. Zadium, good to see you again. Hello, Private Maverick, good to see you as well. I hope you both are doing well. As for myself, I am doing just fine. I can't complain much. Um, so I hope, like I said, I hope everyone's doing well. Tonight, I know last time that I played some video games as our last little foray into the study, and it was a lot of fun. But tonight I thought, we could go back to our reading streams, which well, I'm going to say this ahead of time. Due to some behind the scenes issues, this stream might be the last one for a little bit. I know, sad. But, it'll be only temporary. And of course, I will be back in all my green haired splendor. Oh, I also want to thank, let's see, Cookie2814 as being our new follower. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm glad to have a new scholar join us in the study. So let us see. Oh dear. So tonight's little subject, with the study is, as you might have guessed, it is a vast array of books. Books, novels, short stories, scrolls. Oh, Private Maverick, they better watch out for the cookie monster. Oh, I agree, I agree. I never trusted that thing. He eats too many cookies. Too many cookies are bad for your health. It's better to eat cheese. Cheese is a much healthier snack. It is a superior snack. Cheese cookies, mind you, would also probably be good. Um, so as you can guess, with the study, it has a numerous amounts of information, numerous amounts of subjects. But I will admit, I have a very deep fondness for folk tales and fairy tales. Um, I don't know how it began. I just always loved it, and I always find that folk tales are a wonderful way to look at different cultures from across this earth. Pardon. And I have quite a collection, personal collection of folk tales. So I have actually gathered. Well, you can't. It's right under the desk here, so you really can't tell. Um, I have gathered a whole a whole stack of books of these folk tales, and I thought it might be a little fun tonight for me to pick a few. And if I have time, I might even take requests from anyone who's interested. The odd request of you name a country and I will try and find a folk tale from it. How does that sound to you, gentle scholars? Our scholars are being quite quiet tonight. I'm sure they're being very studious. Private Maverick, let's go for it. Oh, got a bold one here. I can see that you're really eager to dig into the knowledge of the universe. Mm, glorious. Dr. Zadium sounds good. Oh, I'm glad you like it. I'm certain there's some stories here you probably have. Well, I'm certain there's some stories here which will new to everyone. I don't know if anyone might have heard any of these. Depends. Um, many of these, some of these I have read before. Some of them I have not. I reviewed them before I chose them. So we will see what we are. So we'll see how that goes. So everyone, I suggest you all lean back, grab a hot drink if you can, or a cold drink. Not that picky. Have a snack or two. I mean, a snack goes so well with a good story. So, shall we begin then, gentle scholars? Hmm? So sit back, relax, and let's enjoy these stories. Our first story comes from Norway and is entitled The Ash Lad Who Had an Eating Match with the Troll. There was once a farmer who had 3 sons. He was badly off and old and feeble, and his sons wouldn't turn their hands to a thing. To the farm belonged a large, good forest, and there the father wanted the boys to chop wood and see about paying off some of the debt. At last he got them around to his way of thinking, and the eldest was to go out chopping first. When he had made his way into the forest and had started chopping a shaggy fir tree, a big burly troll came up to him.
If you're chopping in my forest, I'm going to kill you,
said the troll. When the boy heard that, he flung aside the axe and headed for home again as best he could. He got home clean out of breath and told them what had happened to him. But his father said he was chicken-hearted. The trolls had never scared him from chopping wood when he was young, he said. On the next day, the second son was to set out, and he fared just like the first. When he had struck the fir tree a few blows with his axe, the troll came up to him, too, and said,
if you're chopping my forest, I'm going to kill you.
The boy hardly dared look at him. He flung aside the axe and took to his heels just like his brother, and just as fast. When he came home again, his father became angry and said that the trolls had never scared him when he was young. Pretty. Father has a bit of a spine, doesn't he? On the third day, the ash lad wanted to set out. You, said the two eldest, you'll certainly manage it, you who've never been beyond the front door. He didn't say much to that, the ash lad didn't, but just asked for as big a lunch as possible to take with him. His mother had no curds, so she hung the cauldron over the fire to curdle a little cheese for him. This he put in his knapsack and set out on his way. When he had been chopping for a little while, the troll came to him and said,
if you're chopping in my forest, I'm going to kill you.
But the boy wasn't slow. He ran over to the knapsack to get the cheese and squeezed it till the whey spurted. If you don't hold your tongue, he shrieked to the troll, I'll squeeze you the way I'm squeezing the water out of this white stone.
Nay, dear fellow, spare me,
said the troll. Trolls are not that smart, I can tell you that.
I'll help you to chop.
Well, on that condition the boy would spare him, and the troll was clever at chopping, so they managed to fell and cut up many cord of wood that during the day. As evening was drawing nigh, the troll said,
now you can come home with me. My house is closer than yours.
Well, the boy went along, and when they came to the troll's home, he was to make up the fire in the hearth, while the boy was to fetch water for the porridge pot. But the two iron buckets were so big and heavy that he couldn't so much as budge them. So the boy said, It's not worth taking along these thimbles. I'm going after the whole well, I am.
Nay, my dear fellow, said the troll, I can't lose my well. You make the fire, and I'll go after the water.
When he came back with the water, they cooked up a huge pot of porridge. If it's all the same to you, said the boy, let's have an eating match.
Oh, yes,
replied the troll, for at that he felt he could always hold his own. Well, they sat down at the table, but the boy stole over and took the knapsack and tied it in front of him. He scooped more into the knapsack than he ate himself. When the knapsack was full, he took up his knife and ripped a gash in it. The troll looked at him, but didn't say anything. When they had eaten a good while longer, the troll put down his spoon.
Nay, now I can't manage any more,
he said. You must eat, said the boy. I'm barely half full yet. Do as I did and cut a hole in your stomach. Then you can eat as much as you wish. Oh man, I can see where this is going, folks.
But doesn't that hurt dreadfully?
asked the troll. Oh, nothing to speak of, replied the boy. So the troll did as the boy said, and then, you might know, that was the end of him. But the boy took all the silver and gold to be found in the mountain and went home with it. With that, he could at least pay some of the debt. Private Maverick, if the troll had regenerative properties, it should heal up. Um, most trolls don't in the Scandinavian folklore. Well, the thing is with folklore, of course, is that magical creatures don't often have consistency. In Scandinavian folklore, trolls are sort of a byword for any sort of magical creature that they use in there. So you get some stories where trolls have like many heads, have one head, are huge as a mountain or as small as a human, have magical powers or have no powers whatsoever. They don't always have that sort of ability. The regenerative property idea, I think, is a much newer concept. In mostly, I think, an invention of newer fantasy novels and such like that. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. It shows you creatures, how concepts evolve from the original or folk tales to the present day. Yeah. So we're going to move away from Europe for a little bit and move into Asia with a story from Vietnam. I think this is the only story from Vietnam I've got in my little booklet here. Um, it's an interesting one. And the thing with folk tales is not every folk tale has magical beings or has mystical powers or ghosts or goblins or ogres or things of that nature. Some folk tales are simply stories about people and what people get up to, little tales of little comedies, little tragedies, the things that mattered to people in those days. Um, so this story is one of those actually. It is called The Fly, and it is from Vietnam. Oh, and pardon me if I get if any words here are wrong. I am reading directly from the book. Everyone in the village knew the usurer, a rich and smart man. Having accumulated a fortune over the years, he settled down to a life of leisure in his big house, surrounded by an immense garden and guarded by a pack of ferocious dogs. But still unsatisfied with what he had acquired, the man went on making money by lending it to people all over the country at exorbitant rates. The usurer reigned supreme in the area, for numerous were those who were in debt to him. One day, the rich man set out for the house of one of his peasants. Despite repeated reminders, the poor laborer just could not manage to pay off his long-standing debt. Working himself to a shadow, the peasant barely succeeded in making ends meet. The moneylender was therefore determined that if he could not get his money back this time, he would proceed to confiscate some of his debtor's most valuable belongings. But the rich man found no one at the peasant's house, but a small boy of 8 or 9 playing alone in the dirt yard. "Child, are your parents home?" the rich man asked. "No, sir," the boy replied, then went on playing with his sticks and stones, paying no attention whatever to the man. "Then where are they?" the rich man asked. somewhat irritated, but the little boy went on playing and did not answer. When the rich man repeated his query, the boy looked up and answered with deliberate slowness, "Well, sir, my father has gone to cut living trees and plant dead ones, and my mother is at the marketplace, selling the wind and buying the moon." Smart little kid. "What? What in heaven are you talking about?" the rich man commanded. "Quick, tell me where they are, or you will see what this stick can do to you." The bamboo walking stick in the big man's hand looked indeed menacing. After repeated questioning, however, the boy only gave the same reply. Exasperated, the rich man told him, "All right, little devil, listen to me. I came here today to take the money your parents owe me. But if you tell me where they really are and what they are doing, I will forget all about the debt. Is that clear to you?" I would not trust this guy, I can tell you that. "Oh, sir, why are you joking with a poor little boy? Do you expect me to believe what you are saying?" For the first time, the boy looked interested. "Well, there is heaven and there is earth to witness my promise," the rich man said, pointing up to the sky and down to the earth. But the boy only laughed. "Sir, heaven and earth cannot talk and therefore cannot testify. I want some living thing to be our witness." Man, this little boy is really smart. Kind of weirdly smart, actually. Catching sight of a fly alighting on a bamboo pole nearby, and laughing inside because he was fooling the boy. I knew it. The rich man proposed, "There is a fly. He can be our witness. Now hurry, and tell me what you mean when you say that your father is out cutting living trees and planting dead ones, while your mother is at the market selling the wind and buying the moon." Looking at the fly on the pole, the boy said, "A fly is a good enough witness for me. Well, here it is, sir. My father has simply gone to cut down my father has simply gone to cut down bamboos and make a fence with them for a man near the river. And my mother, oh, sir, you'll keep your promise, won't you? You will free my parents of all their debts. You really mean it?"
Yes, yes, I do solemnly swear in front of this fly here.
The rich man urged the boy to go on. "Well, my mother, she has gone to the market to sell fans so she can buy oil for our lamps. Isn't that what you would call selling the wind to buy the moon?" Shaking his head, the rich man had to admit inwardly that the boy was a clever one. However, he thought the little genius still had much to learn, believing as he did that a fly could be a witness for anybody. Bidding the boy goodbye, the man told him that he would soon return to make good his promise. Uh, excuse me. A few days had passed when the moneylender returned. This time he found the poor peasant couple at home, for it was late in the evening. A nasty scene ensued, the rich man claiming his money, and the poor peasant apologizing and begging for another delay. Their argument awakened the little boy, who ran to his father and told him, "Father, father, you don't have to pay your debt. This gentleman here has promised me that he would forget all about the money you owe him."
Nonsense!
The rich man shook his walking stick at both father and son. "Nonsense! Are you going to stand there and listen to a child's inventions? I never spoke a word to this boy.
Now tell me, are you going to pay or are you not?
Oh dear. Again, that's what you get for believing this guy. The whole affair ended by being brought before the Mandarin who governed the county. I believe Mandarin in this case refers to a judgmental official. And not knowing what to believe, all the poor peasant and his wife could do was to bring their son with them when they went to court. The little boy's insistence about the rich man's promise was their only encouragement. The Mandarin began by asking the boy to relate exactly what had happened between himself and the moneylender. Happily, the boy hastened to tell about the explanations he gave the rich man in exchange for the debt.
Well, the Mandarin said to the boy, if this man here has indeed made such a promise, we have only your word for it. How do we know that you have not invented the whole story yourself? In a case such as this, you need a witness to confirm it, and you have none.
The boy remained calm and declared that naturally there was a witness to this conversation.
Who is that child?
The Mandarin asked. A fly, your honor.
A fly? What do you mean, a fly? Watch out, young man. Fantasies are not to be tolerated in this place.
The Mandarin's benevolent face suddenly became stern. Yes, your honor, a fly. A fly which was alighting on this gentleman's nose. The boy leaped from his seat.
Insolent little devil! That's a pack of lies!
The rich man roared indignantly, his face like a ripe tomato.
The fly was not on my nose. He was on the house pole.
But he stopped dead. It was, however, too late. The majestic Mandarin himself could not help bursting out laughing. Then the audience burst out laughing. The boy's parents, too, although timidly, laughed. And the boy and the rich man himself, this kind of shocks me, also laughed. With one hand on his stomach, the Mandarin waved the other hand towards the rich man.
Now, that's all settled. We have indeed made your promise, dear sir, to the child. House pull or no house pull, your conversation did happen after all. The court says you must keep your promise.
And still chuckling, he dismissed all parties. Quite a clever little courtroom scene there, I guess. It reminds me actually quite of another folktale, which I do have a copy of. Sadly, I do not have a copy of with me right now, which concerns the scent of rice. Um, if I can remember correctly, I might be able to tell that one off the top of my head. Dr. Zadium, that was great. I know it's great. It's a wonderful little story. I might save the other one until later if I have time, because again, I remember it off the top of my head, I think. But I do have a copy of it. Unfortunately, I do not have access of it to it at the moment. 1 second. Mm, see. I'm gonna have to choose some more stories. Okay. I might have time for a lot of requests from everyone, or I can just pick and choose other stories if you wish. So we are moving from Vietnam and Asia, and we are actually going to read a story from Africa. They are, as you would assume, there is a Taliban. Well, welcome, Yulia and 20. Welcome to the study. Wonderful to see you there. Talipo. No, Talipo is not. Talipo is technically. It's not an African story. That is not. That is southern United States. But no, this story is from Africa. Um, as you would suspect, there is a huge number of cultures all across Africa, each with their own stories, their own beliefs. They're just marvelous, marvelous stories. I'm sure some of you have heard at least stories of like Anansi the spider, which, ironically enough, this story I am about to read comes from that area, the Ashanti people. Which off the top of my head, I cannot recall what part of Africa that is located, unfortunately. But this story, Private Maverick, are we gonna bless the rain in Africa? Um, no. I mean, I love that song, but I enjoy that song, but no. Julian 20, the spider one. Yes, Anansi is a spider. Well, it depends on the story. Some stories he's a spider. Some stories he's a man with the properties of a spider, the original Spider-Man. Some stories he is, well, he's been all sorts of things. And actually, I think I've got one of the Anansi stories in this book, so I might read that one later tonight. But this story does not feature Anansi in it. Well, it is from the Ashanti people, and this story is simply called Talk. Now, I apologize if I get any pronunciations wrong. Sometimes I am very terrible at pronunciations. Unfortunately, you would think a interdimensional omniversal librarian would be better at that, but weakness of mine. Once, not far from the city of already. Once, not far from the city of Accra, on the Gulf of Guinea, a countryman went out to his garden to dig up some yams to take to market. While he was digging, one of the yams said to him, "Well, at last you're here. You never weeded me, but now you come around with your digging stick. Go away and leave me alone." The farmer turned around and looked at his cow in amazement. The cow was chewing her cud and looked at him. "Did you say something?" he asked. The cow kept on chewing and said nothing, but the man's dog spoke up. "It wasn't the cow who spoke to you," the dog said. "It was the yam. The yam says leave him alone." The man became angry, because his dog had never talked before, and he didn't like his tone besides. So he took his knife and cut a branch from a palm tree to whip his dog. Man, this guy's already a jerk. Who whips a dog? Just then, the palm tree said, "Put that branch down." The man was getting very upset about the way things were going, and he started to throw the palm branch away. But the palm branch said, "Man, put me down softly." He put the branch down gently on a stone, and the stone said, "Hey, take that thing off me." He's having quite a day, isn't he? This was enough, and the frightened farmer started to run for his village. On the way he met a fisherman, going the other way with a fish trap on his head. "What's the hurry?" the fisherman asked. "My yam said leave me alone. Then the dog said listen to what the yam says. When I went to whip the dog with a palm branch, the tree said put that branch down. Then the palm branch said do it softly. Then the stone said take that thing off me." "Is that all?" the man with the fish trap asked. "Is that so frightening?" "Well, the man's fish trap said. Did he take it off the stone?" "Wah!" the fisherman shouted. He threw the fish trap on the ground and began to run with the farmer, and on the trail they met a weaver with a bundle of cloth on his head. I'm sensing a pattern here. "Where are you going in such a rush?" he asked them. "My yam said leave me alone," the farmer said. "The dog said listen to what the yam says. The tree said put that branch down. The branch said do it softly. And the stone said take that thing off me." "And then," the fisherman continued, "the fish trap said did he take it off?" "That's nothing to get excited about," the weaver said. "No reason at all." "Oh, yes, it is," his bundle of cloth said. "If it happened to you, you'd run too." "Ah!" the weaver shouted. He threw his bundle on the trail and started running with the other men. Excuse me. They came panting to the ford in the river and found a man bathing. "Are you chasing a gazelle?" he asked them. The first man said breathlessly, "I am. Talked to me, and it said leave me alone. And my dog said listen to your yam. And when I cut myself a branch, the tree said put that branch down. And the branch said do it softly. And the stone said take that thing off me." The fisherman panted, "And my trap said, did he?" And the weaver wheezed, "And my bundle of cloth said, you'd run too." Excuse me. "Is that why you're running?" the man in the river asked. "Well, wouldn't you run if you were in that position?" the river said. The man jumped out of the water and began to run with the others. They ran down the main street of the village to the house of the chief. The chief's servant brought his stool out, and he came and sat on it to listen to their complaints. The men began to recite their troubles. "I went out to my garden to dig yams," the farmer said, waving his arms. "Then everything began to talk. My yam said, 'Leave me alone.' My dog said, 'Pay attention to your yam.' The tree said, 'Put that branch down.' The branch said, 'Do it softly.' The stone said, 'Take it off me.' My fish trap said, 'Well, did he take it off?' the fisherman said. And my cloth said, 'You'd run too,' the weaver said. And the river said the same, the bather said hoarsely, his eyes bulging. The chief listened to them patiently, but he couldn't refrain from scowling. "Now this is really a wild story," he said at last. "You'd better all go back to your work before I punish you for disturbing the peace." So the men went away, and the chief shook his head and mumbled to himself, "Nonsense like that upsets the community." "Fantastic, isn't it?" his stool said. "Imagine a talking yam." Okay, that was a good one. Oh, oh. Okay, that one was funny. That was funny. Oh, the humor of it. That actually belongs to. I don't remember actually the system of stories that belongs to. There is a sort of folktale and fairy tale that specifically, I think they're called list stories, where the whole point of the story is it builds on and on and on a longer list of things. You've probably heard someone. One of the more famous examples I can think of from a European standpoint is what was the name? Now I am blanking on it. Oh, Chicken Little. If you look at that one, that's a list story. It starts with one small character, and then it builds up further and further and further, till you hit basically what is a punchline for the story. Which I think that one's rather good. I liked it. I liked it. It's rather enjoyable and very funny. I need to find the next one because unfortunately I had markers in my book and one of them fell out. Oh dear. Okay. This story we're gonna do next is actually I think this is a very short story. A very short story. It it's actually also our first story out of America. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry about that. The study is a little dusty. Horace has been telling me I need to clean it out a little bit. Unfortunately, I have gotten busy with various other tasks. I am very grateful for Horace to remind me of everything I need to do, and sadly, I tend to sometimes ignore the advice of the little fellow. Where was I? Oh, yes, yes, yes. So this story is actually an American story. Specifically, it is listed as being uh, African American in origin. I believe in Virginia. I have heard it in several other books, in different variations, but this one is, but this has one variation in it, and it's actually I am rather fond of the story. It's also a ghost story. Ooh, that is it's not. I usually don't read ghost stories this time of year. I prefer other little periods to sate our interest in the macabre or horrible. Private Maverick, Sleepy Hollow. No, it is not Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow. At some point, I may do a reading of Sleepy Hollow. But Sleepy Hollow was invented wholesale, I believe, by Washington Irving, which is a whole other category of story. And I don't know if I would categorize that as folklore or not. You might have to ask the experts in that matter. But no, this is not Sleepy Hollow. This story is called Hold Him Tab. A number of wagons were traveling together one afternoon in December. It was extremely cold, and about the middle of the afternoon it began to snow. They soon came to an abandoned settlement by the roadside and decided it would be a good place to camp out of the storm, as there were stalls for their horses and an old dwelling house in which they themselves could stay. When they had nearly finished unhooking their horses, a man came along and said that he was the owner of the place, and that the men were welcome to stay there as long as they wanted to, but that the house was haunted, and not a single person had stayed in it alive for 25 years. On hearing this, the men immediately moved their camp to a body of woods about 1/2 mile further up the road. One of them, whose name was Tab, and who was braver than the rest, said that he was not afraid of haunts, and that he did not mean to take himself and horses into the woods to perish in the snow, but that he'd stay where he was. I don't know if he's brave or foolhardy. We're about to see. So Tab stayed in the house. He built a big fire, cooked and ate his supper, and rested well through the night without being disturbed. About daybreak, he awoke and said, "What fools those other fellows are! What fools those other fellows are to have stayed in the woods when they might have stayed in here and been as warm as I am." Just as he had finished speaking, he looked up to the ceiling, and there was a large man dressed in white clothes just stretched out
under the ceiling and sticking up to it. Before he could get from under the before he could get from under the man fell right down upon him, and then commenced a great tussle between Tab and the man. They made so much noise that the men in the woods heard it, and ran to see what was going on. When they looked in at the window and saw the struggle, first Tab was on top, and then the other man. One of them cried, "Hold him, Tab! Hold him!" "You can bet your soul I got him," said Tab. Soon the man got Tab out of the window. "Hold him, Tab! Hold him!" one of the men shouted. "You can bet your life I got him," came from Tab. Soon the man got Tab upon the roof of the house. Wow, already? "Hold him, Tab! Hold him! Hold him, Tab! Hold him!" said one of the men. "You can bet your boots I got him," answered Tab. Finally, the man got Tab up off the roof and into the air. "Hold him, Tab! Hold him!" shouted one of the men. "I got him!" "And he's got me too," said Tab. The man, who was a ghost, carried Tab straight up into the air until they were both out of sight. Nothing was ever seen of him again. Ooh, ooh, sends shivers down your spine, that story. Ooh, scary. There, there's quite a lot of folk tales which are that short. Not many folk tales are very long. It's a rarity, actually, which makes them prime storytelling, of course, material, since it doesn't take you very long to read them out loud to an audience. And some stories are I've seen stories which have just been the shortest of things. Dr. Zadium, and then they named a soda after him. Oh, oh, oh. I agree with Private Maverick. Boo, boo. That was terrible. That was terrible. Hmm. Let me see. But it's very long. Hmm. Might be a little bit done. Oh, pardon me. I am reviewing the next story. It's quite a long story, so I might want to skip that one for the sake of my throat. Oh, I shouldn't shy from a long story, should I? What do you think, gentle scholars? Should I do a long story or should I stick to some of the shorter ones tonight? I enjoy your input, so any input you can give is welcome. Julian 20, yes please. Yes please on what? Okay. Excuse me. Okay. This is a longer one.
And this one we are going back to Europe. Specifically, we are going to France. This story, it can qualify as probably a fairy tale. I can see it as a folk tale, and it's one that I have seen in animated form once. A wonderful little story. And this story is, excuse me, The White Cat. There was once a king who had 3 sons, all handsome, brave, and noble of heart. Nevertheless, some wicked courtiers made their father believe they were eager to wear his crown before he was ready to resign it. He therefore invented a plan to get them out of the kingdom and prevent them carrying out their undutiful projects. Sending for them, he conversed with them kindly and said, "You must realize, my dear children, that my great age prevents me from attending as closely as I am here done to state affairs. I fear this may be injurious to my subjects. I therefore desire to place my crown on the head of one of you, but it is no more than just that in return for such a present. You should procure me some amusement in my retirement, before I leave the capital forever. I cannot help thinking that a little dog, handsome, faithful, and engaging, would be the very thing to make me happy. So I declare that he who brings me the most perfect little dog shall be my successor." Excuse me for one moment. The princes were much surprised at the fancy of their father to have a little dog, yet they accepted the proposition with pleasure. Accordingly, they set off on their travels, after taking leave of the king, who presented them with an abundance of money and jewels, and appointed that day twelvemonth for their return. Before separating, however, they took some refreshment together in an old palace about 3 miles out of town. They mutually agreed to meet in the same place on that day, twelvemonth, and go all together with their presents to court. They also agreed to change their names and travel incognito. Each took a different road, but it is intended to relate the adventures of only the youngest, who was the most comely, amiable, and accomplished prince in the world. As he traveled from town to town, he bought all the handsome dogs that fell in his way, and as soon as he saw one that was handsomer than those he had, he made a present of the rest, for 20 servants would scarcely have been sufficient to take care of all the dogs he was continuously purchasing. Oh boy. At length, wandering he knew not whither, he found himself in a forest. Night suddenly came on, and with it a violent storm of thunder, lightning, and rain. To add to his perplexity, he lost his way. After he had groped about for a long time, he perceived a light, which made him suppose that he was not far from some house. He went towards it, and in a short time found himself at the gates of the most magnificent palace he had ever beheld. The entrance door was of gold, covered with sapphires, which shone so that the strongest eyesight could scarcely bear to look at it. This was the light the prince had seen from the forest. The prince observed a deer's foot fastened to the golden door by a chain of diamonds. He could not help wondering at the magnificence he beheld, and the security in which the inhabitants seemed to live. "For," said he to himself, "nothing could be easier than for thieves to steal this chain, and as many of the sapphire stones as would make their fortunes." He pulled the chain and heard a bell, the sound of which was exquisite. In a few moments the door was opened, yet he perceived nothing but 12 hands in the air, each holding a torch. The prince felt himself gently pushed on from behind by some other hands. He walked on in great perplexity till he entered a vestibule inlaid with, oh boy, I don't even know how to pronounce this word. Porphyr. I am going to skip that word because I am not going to even embarrass myself attempting to pronounce it. And lapis stone, where the most melodious voice he had ever heard chanted the following words: "Welcome, prince, no danger fear. Mirth and love attend you here. You shall break the magic spell that on a beauteous lady fell. Welcome, prince, no danger fear. Mirth and love attend you here." The prince now advanced with confidence, wondering what these words could mean. The hands moved him forward towards a large door of coral, which opened of itself to give him admittance into a splendid apartment, built of mother of pearl, through which he passed into others, so richly adorned with paintings and jewels, and so resplendently lighted with thousands of lamps, that he imagined he must be in an enchanted palace. When he had passed through 60 apartments, all equally splendid, he was stopped by the hands, and a large easy chair advanced of itself towards the fireplace. Then the hands took off his wet clothes and supplied their place with the finest linen imaginable, adding a comfortable dressing gown embroidered with gold and pearl. The hands next brought him an elegant dressing table, combed his hair so very gently that he scarcely felt their touch. They held before him a beautiful basin, filled with perfumes, for him to wash his face and hands, and afterward took off the dressing gown, and dressed him in a suit of clothes of still greater splendor. Okay, I know the word is I know words were used differently back then, and there are different definitions for such phrases, but still, this is unfortunate. When his toilet was complete, they conducted him to an apartment he had not yet seen, and which also was magnificently furnished. There was a table spread for supper, and everything upon it was of the purest gold, adorned with jewels. Does that mean even the food was adorned with gold and jewels? Because that would be very difficult and very unhealthy for you. The prince observed there were two covers set, and was wondering who was to be his companion, when his attention was suddenly caught by a small figure, not a foot high, which just then entered the room and advanced towards him. It had on a long black veil, and was supported by two cats dressed in mourning, and with swords by their sides. They were followed by a numerous retinue of cats, some carrying cages full of rats, and others mouse traps full of mice. The prince was at a loss what to think. The little figure now approached, and threw aside her veil. He beheld a most beautiful white cat. She seemed young and melancholy. "My prince," she said, "you are welcome. Your present affords me the greatest pleasure." "Madame," replied he, "I would fain thank you for your generosity, nor can I help observing that you must be an extraordinary creature to possess, with your present form, the gift of speech, and the most magnificent palace I have ever seen. All this is very true, answered the beautiful cat. But, Prince, I am not fond of talking, and least of all do I like compliments. Let us therefore sit down to supper. Wow, she is to the point, isn't she? Also, I thought he was supposed to be going incognito, and yet she knows he's a prince. Not a very good bit of disguise, is it? The hands then placed the dishes on the table, and the prince and white cat seated themselves at it. The first dish was a pie made of young pigeons, and the next a fricassee of the fattest mice. Ooh, oh, do they expect the prince to eat this stuff? The white cat, who guessed the prince's thoughts, assured him that there were certain dishes at table which had been dressed on purpose for him, in which there were not a morsel of either rat or mouse. Ah, there it is. Julian 20, it is protein. Yes, it is protein. I am well aware it is protein. But it still seems like an odd thing to have to eat. Accordingly, he ate healthy, of such as she recommended. When supper was over, he perceived that the white cat had a portrait set in gold hanging to one of her feet. He begged her permission to look at it. To his astonishment, he saw the portrait of a handsome young man, who exactly resembled himself. He thought there was something more extraordinary in all this, yet as the white cat sighed and looked very sorrowful, he did not venture to ask any questions. He conversed with her on different subjects, and found her extremely well versed in everything that was passing in the world. When the evening was far advanced, his hostess wished him a good night, and he was conducted by the hands to his bedchamber, which was different from anything he had seen in the palace, being hung with the wings of butterflies mixed with the most curious feathers. His bed was of gauze, festooned with bunches of the gayest ribbons, and the looking glasses reached from the floor to the ceiling. The prince slept little, and in the morning was awakened by a confused noise. The hands took him out of bed and put on him a handsome hunting jacket. He looked into the courtyard and perceived more than 500 cats busily employed in preparing for the hunting field, for this was a day of festival. Presently, the white cat came to his apartment, and having politely inquired after his health, she invited him to partake of their amusement. The prince mounted a wooden horse, richly caparisoned, which had been prepared for him. The beautiful white cat mounted a monkey. Okay, this is just getting strange. She wore a dragoon's cap, which made her look so fierce that all the rats and mice ran away in the utmost terror. Everything being ready, the horn sounded, and away they went. No hunting was ever more agreeable. When the chase was over, the whole retinue returned to the palace. The white cat immediately exchanged her dragoon's cap for the veil, and sat down to supper with the prince, who, being very hungry, ate heartily, and afterward partook with her of the most delicious wines. He then was conducted to his chamber as before, and awakened in the morning to renew the same sort of life, which day after day became so charming to him that he no longer thought of anything but of pleasing the sweet little creature who received him so courteously. Accordingly, every day was spent in new amusements. The prince had almost forgotten his country and relations, and sometimes even regretted that he was not a cat. So great was his affection for his mewing companion. "Alas," said he to the white cat, "how will it afflict me to leave you, whom I have loved so much. Okay, you either make yourself a lady or make me a cat. She smiled at the prince's wish, but offered no reply. At length, the 12th month was nearly expired. The white cat, who knew the very day when the prince was to reach his father's palace, reminded him that he had but 3 days longer to look for a perfect little dog. The prince, astonished at his own forgetfulness, began to grieve. The cat told him not to be so sorrowful, since she would not only provide him with a little dog, but also with a wooden horse, which should convey him safely home in less than 12 hours. Look here, she said, showing him an acorn. This contains what you desire. The prince put the acorn to his ear and heard the barking of a little dog. Transported with joy, he thanked the cat 1,000 times, and the next day, bidding her a tender farewell, he set out on his return. The prince arrived first at the place of rendezvous, and was soon joined by his brothers. They embraced and began to give an account of their success. The youngest showed them only a little mongrel cur, telling them that he thought it could not fail to please the king from its extraordinary beauty. The brothers trod on each other's toes under the table, as much as to say, "We have little to fear from this sorry-looking animal." The next day they went together to the palace. The dogs of the two elder brothers were lying on cushions, and so curiously wrapped around with embroidered quilts that one would scarcely venture to touch them. The youngest produced his cure, and all wondered how the prince could hope to receive a crown for such a shabby present. The king examined the two little dogs of the elder princes, and declared he thought them so equally beautiful that he knew not to which with justice he could give the preference. They accordingly began to dispute, when the youngest prince, taking his acorn from his pocket, soon ended their contentment. For a little dog appeared, which could with ease go through the smallest ring, and was beside a miracle of beauty. An impossibility of science, that's what that is. The king could not possibly hesitate in declaring his satisfaction, yet, as he was no more inclined than the year before to part with his crown, he told his sons that he was extremely obliged to them for the pains they had taken, and since they had succeeded so well, he wished that they would make a second attempt. He therefore begged that they would take another year in order to procure a piece of cambric fine enough to be drawn through the eye of a small needle. The three princes thought this very hard, yet they set out in obedience to the king's command. The two eldest took different roads, and the youngest remounted his wooden horse, and in a short time arrived at the palace of his beloved white cat, who received him with the greatest joy, while the hands helped him to dismount, and provided him with immediate refreshment. Afterwards, the prince gave the white cat an account of the admiration which had been bestowed on the beautiful little dog, and informed her of the further injunction of his father. "Make yourself perfectly easy, dear prince," said she. "I have in my palace some cats who are perfect adepts in making such cambric as the king requires, so you have nothing to do but to give me the pleasure of your company while it is being made, and I will procure you all the amusement possible." Okay. She ordered the most curious fireworks to be played off inside of the window of the apartment in which they were sitting, and nothing but festivity and rejoicing was heard throughout the palace for the prince's return. As the white cat frequently gave proofs of an excellent understanding, the prince was by no means tired of her company. She talked with him of state affairs, of theatres, of fashions. In short, she was at a loss on no subject whatever. In this manner the 12 months again passed quickly away, but the cat took care to remind the prince of his duty in proper time. "For once, my prince," said she, "I will have the pleasure of equipping you as suits your high ranks." Looking into the courtyard, he saw a superb carriage, ornamented all over with gold, silver, pearls, and diamonds, drawn by 12 horses as white as snow, and harnessed in the most sumptuous trappings. Behind the carriage 1,000 guards, richly apparelled, while waiting to attend on the prince's person. Dr. Zadium, turn in early, take care, and thank you for the stream. Aw, thank you for coming, Dr. Zadium. It was wonderful to have you here. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Behind the carriage 1,000 guards, richly apparelled, were waiting to attend on the prince's person. The cat then presented him with a nut. Again, I am seeing a pattern here. "You will find in it," said she, "the piece of cambric I promised you. Do not break the shell till you are in the presence of the king your father." Then she hastily bade him adieu. Nothing could exceed the speed with which the snow-white horses conveyed this fortunate prince to his father's palace, where his brothers had just arrived before him. The princes hastened to place at the feet. Oh, they embraced each other and demanded an immediate audience of the king, who received them with the greatest of kindness. The princes hastened to place at the feet of his majesty the curious present he had required them to procure. The eldest produced a piece of cambric so extremely fine that his friends had no doubt of its passing through the eye of a needle. But when the king tried to draw the cambric through the eye of the needle, it would not pass, though it failed but very little. Then came the second prince, who made as sure of obtaining the crown as his brother had done, but alas, with no better success, for though his piece of cambric was exquisitely fine, yet it could not be drawn through the eye of the needle. Excuse me. It was now the turn of the youngest prince, who accordingly advanced, and opening an elegant little box inlaid with jewels, took out a walnut and cracked the shell, imagining he should immediately perceive his piece of cambric. But what was his astonishment to see nothing but a filbert! He did not, however, lose his hopes. He cracked the filbert, and it presented him with a cherry stone. The lords of the court, who had assembled to witness this extraordinary trial, could not, any more than the prince's brother, refrain from laughing. To think he should be so silly as to claim the crown on no better pretensions. The prince, however, cracked the cherry stone, which was filled with a kernel. He divided it, and found in the middle a grain of wheat, and in that a grain of millet seed. He was now absolutely confounded, and could not help muttering between his teeth,
Oh, white cat, thou hast deceived me. At this instant he felt his hand scratched by the claw of a cat, upon which he again took courage. Opening the grain of millet seed, to the astonishment of all present, he drew forth a piece of cambric 400 yards long, and fine enough to be threaded with perfect ease through the eye of the needle. When the king found he had no pretext left for refusing the crown to his youngest son, he sighed deeply, and it was easy to be seen that he was sorry for the prince's success. Well, that's kind of a jerk move. My sons, said he, it is so gratifying to the heart of a father to receive proofs of his children's love and obedience that I cannot refuse myself the satisfaction of requiring of you one thing more. You must undertake another expedition. That one of you who, by the end of the year, brings me the most beautiful lady shall marry her and obtain my crown. Just gonna keep throwing him. Is he just gonna keep throwing them quests willy nilly now? They already got to the first two. So they again took leave of the king and of each other, and set out without delay. And in less than 12 hours, our young prince arrived at the palace of his dear white cat. Everything went on as before, till the end of another year. At length, only one day remained of the year. The white cat thus addressed him: "Tomorrow, my prince, you must present yourself at the palace of your father, and give him a proof of your obedience. It depends only on yourself to conduct thither the most beautiful princess ever yet beheld. For the time has come when the enchantment by which I am bound may be ended. You must cut off my head and tail." Jeez! Jeez! Oh man! Continued she, "and throw them onto the fire." Well, that's a pretty violent way of fixing a curse. Excuse me. I mean, I, it's a cat. I mean, I get it, but it's a cat, a kitty. Why would you do that? Even to break a curse. I mean, come on. That's horrifying. Yulian 20. Yes, I agree. "I," said the prince hastily, "I cut off your head and tail? You surely mean to try my affection, which, believe me, beautiful cat, is truly yours." "You mistake me, generous prince," said she. "I do not doubt your regard, but if you wish to see me in any other form than that of a cat, you must consent to do as I desire." Private Maverick. Was this by the Brothers Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen? Neither. This is a story from France. Brothers Grimm gathered stories from the Germanic areas, while Hans Christian Andersen, of course, wrote in Denmark. So this is from neither. Um, though there are stories in the Brothers Grimm canon which are similar to this, of which I will discuss after this story. The prince's eyes filled with tears as she spoke, yet he considered himself obliged to undertake the dreadful task. The cat continuing to press him with the greatest eagerness, with a trembling hand he drew his sword, cut off her head and tail. Oh, jeez. Just reading this is hard. And threw them into the fire. No sooner was this done than the most beautiful lady his eyes had ever seen stood before him.
Ere he had sufficiently recovered, ere he had sufficiently recovered from his surprise to speak to her, a long train of attendants, who at the same moment as their mistress were changed to their natural shapes, came to offer their congratulations to the queen and inquire her commands. She received them with the greatest kindness, and ordering them to withdraw, thus addressed the astonished prince. Do not imagine, dear prince, that I have always been a cat. My father was the monarch of 6 kingdoms, and here we go with the info dump. He tenderly loved my mother, and left her always at liberty to follow her own inclinations. Her prevailing passion was to travel, and a short time before my birth, having heard of some fairies who owned large gardens filled with the most delicious fruit, she had so strong a desire to eat some of them that she set out for the country where they lived. Oh boy. She arrived at their abode, which she found to be a magnificent palace, glittering on all sides with gold and precious stones. She knocked a long time at the gates, but no one came, nor could she perceive the least sign that it had any inhabitant. The difficulty, however, only increased the violence of my mother's longing, for she saw the tops of the trees above the garden walls loaded with the most luscious fruits. The queen ordered her attendants to place tents close to the door of the palace, but having waited 6 weeks without seeing anyone pass the gates, she fell sick of vexation, and her life was despaired of. One night, as she lay half asleep, she turned herself about, and opening her eyes, perceived a little old woman, very ugly and deformed, seated in the easy chair of her bedside. So this story is being told by the former white cat to the prince. I got it. I and my sister fairies, said she, take it very ill that your majesty should so obstinately persist in getting some of our fruit, but since so precious a life is at stake, we consent to give you as much as you can carry away, provided you will give us in return what we shall ask. Ah, kind fairy, cried the queen, I will give you anything that I possess, even my very kingdoms, on condition that I eat one of your fruit. Never do this with a fairy. Ever. They are not to be trusted, for the most part. The old fairy then informed the queen that what they required was that she should give them her child as soon as it should be born, adding that every possible care should be taken of it, and that it should become the most accomplished princess. The queen replied that however cruel the conditions she must accept them, since nothing but the fruit could save her life. In short, dear prince, continued the lady, my mother instantly got out of bed, and was dressed by her attendants, entered the palace, and satisfied her longing. Having eaten her fill, she ordered 4,000 mules to be loaded with the fruit, which had the virtue of containing all the year round in a state of perfection. Thus provided, she returned to the king my father, who was the whole court, who with the whole court received her with rejoicings. One moment, please. All this time, the queen said nothing to my father of the promise she had made to give her daughter to the fairies. Oh no, I do not see this turning out well. She grew very melancholy. At length, being pressed by the king, she declared the truth. Nothing could exceed his affliction when he heard that his only child was to be given to the fairies. He bore it, however, as well as he could, for fear of adding to my mother's grief, and also believing he should find some means of keeping me in a place of safety, which the fairies would not be able to approach. As soon as I was born, he had me conveyed to a tower in the palace, to which there were 20 flights of stairs and a door to each, of which my father kept the key, so that none came near me without my consent. You don't try to cheat out the fairies. You don't do that. When the fairies heard of what had been done, they sent first to demand me, and on my father's refusal, they let loose a monstrous dragon, which devoured men, women, and children, and which, by the breath of its nostrils, destroyed everything it came near, so that even the trees and plants began to die. Are we mixing two different fairy tales in this one? Because all of a sudden it seems like we are listening to a story of a different fairy tale alongside this fairy tale. Huh. The version of the White Cat I have seen did not have this whole backstory in it. Interesting. The grief of the king was excessive, and finding that his whole kingdom would in a short time be reduced to famine, he consented to give me into their hands. I was accordingly laid in a cradle of mother of pearl, ornamented with gold and jewels, and carried to their palace, when the dragon immediately disappeared. The fairies placed me in a tower elegantly furnished, but to which there was no door, so that whoever approached was obliged to come by the windows, which were a great height from the ground. In this place was I educated by the fairies, who behaved to me with the greatest kindness. My clothes were splendid, and I was instructed in every kind of accomplishment. In short, Prince, if I had never seen anyone but themselves, I should have remained very happy. Oh my goodness. Like I said, this is a long tale. One day, however, as I was talking at the window with my parrot, when did she get a parrot? I mean, we didn't hear about it before and we haven't seen it since, so where did this come from? I perceived a young man listening to our conversation. As I had never seen a man except in pictures, I was not sorry for the opportunity of gratifying my curiosity. I thought him a very pleasing object. At length he bowed in the most respectful manner, without daring to speak, for he knew that I was in the palace of the fairies. When it began to grow dark, he went away, and I vainly endeavored to see which road he took. I resolved to find some means of escaping from my tower. I begged the fairies to bring me a netting needle, a mesh, and some cord, saying I wished to make some nets to amuse myself with catching birds at my window. This they readily complied with, and in a short time I completed a ladder long enough to reach to the ground. All at once the window opened, and the fairy Violent, mounted on the dragon's back, rushed into the tower. The fairy touched me with her wand, and I instantly became a white cat. She conducted me to this palace, which belonged to my father, and gave me a train of cats for my attendants, together with the 12 hands that waited on your highness. So they're punishing her and rewarding her too. Understood. She then informed me of my birth and the death of my parents. Oh, man. And pronounced that I should not be restored to my natural figure until a young prince should cut off my head and tail. You ended the enchantment. I need not add that I already love you more than my life. Let us therefore hasten to the palace of the king, your father, and obtain his approbation to our marriage. So we're finally done with the flashback. Finally. The prince and princess accordingly set out, set out side by set out side by side in a carriage of still greater splendor than before, and reached the palace just as the two brothers had arrived with two beautiful princesses. The king, hearing that each of his sons had succeeded in finding what he had required, and began to think of some new expedient to delay the time of his resigning the crown. But when the king was assembled with the whole court to pass judgment, the princess, who accompanied the youngest, perceiving his thoughts by his countenance, stepped majestically forward, and thus addressed him: "It is a pity that your majesty, who is so capable of governing, should think of resigning the crown. I am fortunate enough to have 6 kingdoms in my possession. Permit me to bestow one on each of the eldest princesses, and to enjoy the remaining 4 in the society of your youngest. And may it please your majesty to keep your own kingdom, and make no decision concerning the beauty of 3 princesses, who without such a proof of your majesty's preference will no doubt live happily together." Aw, that's so nice of her. The air resounded with the applause of the assembly. The young prince and princess embraced the king, and next their brothers and sisters. The 3 weddings immediately took place, and the kingdoms were divided as the princess had proposed. Whew, that was a long one. Oh, oh, I need a drink. Oh, so yes, the white cat. The white cat follows in a lot of the patterns of a lot of different folk tales. That being a princess or a prince who is placed under a curse. Yulia and I do love that story. Oh, I'm glad I could read it for you then. That's I'm so glad. But there are a lot of stories about princes and princesses who are placed under a curse, which transforms them into an animal, which can only be, of course, undone by their true love. You can see examples of this in the Frog Prince, in the story of the White Cat, as you heard. There's a story, I think it's called Hans My Hedgehog, I think, which is another version of a similar tale. Um, there's a Hungarian variation called just the Hedgehog to that one. There is a variation from Sweden, 2 variations from Sweden. One is a story about a mouse princess, and the other one is a tale of a serpent prince, also known as the Lindworm Prince. Another very famous fairy tale, folk tale. It's like many folk tales, there are variations all across the world. Um, which this one, as I read, is only one of them. Give me 1 second to relax my throat a little bit, hydrate myself. Okay, and we've got 2 more stories actually. We're going to move on to a story from Sweden. And this one is a slightly longer one too. And once again, we are going to from Sweden. So this one is another bit of a longer one, and I read it ahead of time, and it is a little bit more on the gruesome side. So 1 second. Just 1 second. Okay. So this story is called Onan in the Mountain. Once there was a farmer who had 3 sons. His fields were right next to the fields of Onan in the mountain. Only a stream separated them. It was a good thing for the farmer that the stream was there, for trolls can't cross running water, and he didn't think too highly of Onan. One day the farmer told his sons to go over to Onan's, propose to his daughters, and at the same time take Onan's blunderbuss and kill the rooster that woke him every morning when he went out to work in the fields. Already we're on a violent note here. The boys went on their way, but when they came to the mountain, Onan was gone. Onan's wife, an obliging sort of woman, let them sleep overnight in the attic, where the daughters slept. Early in the morning, Perkle, the youngest of the boys, got up and found the blunderbuss that killed everything it touched. First he killed the rooster, and then all 3 girls. Jeez! Perkle's a violent little guy. Then he woke his brothers up, and they all hurried home. Soon afterward, Onan returned. Since he was tired, he fell asleep immediately and slept until the sun was high in the sky. He asked his wife why the rooster hadn't woken him up as usual, but all she knew was that the farmer's sons had come in the evening to propose to their daughters, and that they were still up in the attic. When Owen went to check, the first thing that he saw was the vigilant rooster with his legs in the air. In bed lay all 3 girls, dead. Enraged, Owen rushed down to the stream, where he spied Perkle standing on the other side.
How do you do, Perkle?
How do you do, Pop?
Are you the one who stole my blunderbuss, killed my rooster, and murdered my daughters?
Yes, Pop, I'm the one.
Will you be back again?
Yes, Pop, that I will. And the rascal just walked calmly away. Onan, who couldn't cross the stream, had to turn back home.
Just you wait, he thought. When you come back, you'll get what's coming to you.
Now it happened that Onan was the owner of a pair of golden sheets that the farmer coveted, and one day he told Perkle about them. Perkle said that he could probably get his hands on them if only he could have a bit of dissolved yeast. Oh, this story. You know what? I'm going to skip this story. I didn't read it all the way through and I missed one part in it. Yeah. Sorry about that, folks. I'm going to find another story to substitute for it. There's a bit in it that I forgot about. Okay, let's see. What can I... I'll look for another Swedish story. Okay, let's see. That's the thing with folk tales. Some of them are very. When you go back to the original Grimm stories, for instance, they can be very violent, a little bit more. What's the word I am looking for? They can be more upfront with things. Oh, what am I thinking? So give me a second. Okay, here we go. This is a shorter one, but it's a nice little one. It features a troll in it as well. It's called Hober's Hoberg's. I try to pronounce this as best I can. Hobergsguben. Julian 20. Who doesn't love troll stories? I know they're so good. There was there was to be a christening at the home of the neighbors of a troll called Hobergskuben. And so the host. Oh, there's a little note here. The name Hobergskuben refers to a medieval belief that trolls lived in the Hobs, Hogsbergs, tall hills or mountains, and that humans had better stay friends with them. Good to note. I will restart it. There was to be a christening at the home of the neighbors of a troll called Hobergsgruben, and so the hosts thought that they'd better invite him. As a neighbor, he was fine, but as a guest, he ate far too much, and so they weren't too eager to have him at the christening. Still, they sent their boy off with the invitation.
Will there be music? Asked Hobergskuben.
Yes, St. Peter will be playing, and St. Michael will play the drums, answered the boy. Hobergskuben had misgivings about both of them, especially St. Michael, since the day he'd thrown his drumstick after Hobergskuben and knocked off magical creatures that inhabit it, the fairies, the fae, the banshees, leprechauns, all manner of them, all manner. So I am going to be reading a story from that area. In fact, the book I have actually makes note of where this story came from and the date that it was recorded. So this story is the legend of Nak. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. The legend of Nakfirna, and it comes from Cork in Ireland, and it was and it was originally told by a T. Crofton Croker in 1825. Okay, so here we go. It is a very good thing not to be any way in dread of the fairies, for without doubt they have then less power over a person. But to make too free with them, or to disbelieve in them altogether, is as foolish a thing as man, woman, or child can do. It has been truly said that good manners are no burthen, and that civility costs nothing. But there are some people foolhardily enough to disregard doing a civil thing, which, whatever they may think, can never harm themselves or anyone else, and who at the same time will go out of their way for a bit of mischief, which never can serve them. But sooner or later they will come to know better, as you shall hear of Carlo Daly, a strapping young fellow up out of Connacht, whom they used to call in his own country Devil Daly. Carlo Daly used to go roving about from one place to another, and the fear of nothing stopped him. He would as soon pass an old churchyard or a regular fairy ground at any hour of the night as go from one room into another without even ever making the sign of the cross, or saying, "Good luck attend you, gentlemen." It so happened that he was once journeying in the country of Limerick towards the Baalbek of Ireland, the venerable town of Kilmallock, and just at the foot of Knockferna he overtook a respectable looking man jogging along upon a white pony. The night was coming on, and they rode side by side for some time, without much conversation passing between them, further than saluting each other very kindly. At last, Carlo Daly asked his companion how far he was going. "Not far your way," said the farmer, for his appearance bespoke him. "I'm only going to the top of this hill here." "And what might take you there?" said old Daly, "at this time of the night?" "Why, then," replied the farmer, "if you want to know, 'tis the good people." "The fairies, you mean?" said O'Daly. "Whist, whist," said his fellow traveller, or you may be sorry for it." And he turned his pony off the road they were going towards a little path which led up the side of the mountain, wishing Carol O'Daly good night and a safe journey. "That fella," thought Carol, "is about no good this blessed night, and I would have no fear of swearing one if I took my Bible oath. That is something else beside the fairies, or the good peoples, as he calls them, that is taking him up the mountain at this hour." "The fairies!" he repeated. "Is it for a well-shaped man like him to be going after little chaps like the fairies? To be sure, some say they are such things, and more say not. But I know this, that never afraid would I be of a dozen of them, aye, of 2 dozen, for that matter, if they are no bigger than what I hear tell of." The way this is written is very unique. Carol Daly, whilst these thoughts were passing in his mind, had fixed his eyes steadfastly on the mountain, behind which the full moon was rising majestically. Upon an elevated point that appeared darkly against the moon's disk, he beheld the figure of a man leading a pony, and he had no doubt that it was of the farmer, with whom he had just parted company. Oh boy, I do not. I have a bad feeling about this, scholars. A sudden resolve to follow flashed across the mind of O'Daly with the speed of lightning. Both his courage and curiosity had been worked up by his yeah word con, uh, by his con, congenia I cannot say it by his some by his to a pitch of chivalry, and muttering, "Here after you, old boy." He dismounted from his horse, bound him to an old thorn tree, and then commenced vigorously ascending the mountain. Following as well as he could the direction taken by the figures of the man and pony, he pursued his way, occasionally guided by their partial appearance, and after toiling nearly 3 hours over a rugged and somewhat swampy path, came to a green spot on the top of the mountains, where he saw the white pony at full liberty, grazing as quietly as may be. O'Daly looked around for the rider, but he was nowhere to be seen. He, however, soon discovered, close to where the pony stood, an opening in the mountain, like the mouth of a pit, and he remembered having heard when a child, many a tale about the Poldhuv, or black hole, of Knockferna, how it was the entrance to the fairy castle, which was within the mountain, and how a man, whose name was Ahern, a land surveyor in that part of the country, had once attempted to fathom it with a line, and had been drawn down into it, and was never again heard of, with many other tales of the like nature. But, thought O'Daly, these are old women's stories, and since I've come up so far, I'll just knock at the castle door and see if the fairies are at home. Don't do it, don't do it. No sooner said than done, for seizing a large stone as big, aye, bigger than his two hands, he flung it with all his strength down into the Poldhuv of Knockferna. He heard it bounding and tumbling about from one rock to another with a terrible noise, and he leant his head over to try and hear if it would reach the bottom. When? What should the very stone he had thrown in do but come up again with as much force as it had gone down, and gave him such a blow full in the face that it sent him rolling down the side of Knockferna, head over heels, tumbling from one crag to another, much faster than he came up. And in the morning Carol O'Daly was found, lying beside his horse, the bridge of his nose broken, which disfigured him for life, his head all cut and bruised, and both his eyes closed up, and as black as if Sir Daniel Donnelly had painted them for him. Carol O'Daly was never bold again in riding alone near the haunts of the fairies after dusk, but small blame to him for that, and if ever he happened to be benighted in a lonesome place, he would make the best of his way to his journey's end, without asking questions, or turning to the right or to the left, to seek after the good people, or any who kept company with them. As I said before, beware of the fair folk. They are not to be trusted, not to be bothered, and not to be toyed with. So, I have a fair bit of time after this. Are there any story requests? Any countries you want to hear stories from? I have a whole pile of books next to me, and they are fully open to viewer requests. Oh, Native American story. Um, Actually, I've got a book of them. Give me one moment. I will do another short little break. I have to go grab it. hello, Jewelry Jelly. Welcome to the study. Oh, I am so honored. This is my first raid. Oh, I am so honored by this. Thank you. Thank you. Hello. We're reading folk tales tonight, and I am taking viewer requests from other nations. Oh, it's fine. It's fine. It still means a lot to me to have you here. I'm so happy to see you here. You can. Julian 20 just requested a Native American story. Julian 20, do you have a specific region that you want to hear a story from? Because, like with Africa, Native American culture is vast, and it is there is a lot of different stories out there. Okay, I will try and see if I can find a good one then. Just Julian 20, just pick one. Okay, I am trying to pick one. Let's take a look. Do you want a short story or a longer story, Julian 20? Short, okay. Oh, no, I can't do that one. Let me see if I can find one. Okay. Just give me a moment. There is a this book is very big. Okay, let's see. Trying to find one that's I am good at. Okay. Okay, so this one is it's a short one. It's from the can't pronounce. I don't dare try to I don't know if I can dare try to pronounce some of these words. They're very difficult to pronounce. I will type it in so that you know because I don't want to pronounce the word wrong. So this story is from this tribe of people. I can see if I get that right. Oh, oh, oh. I can't even type it in. Oopsie. Of course. Never mind. Um, I am just going to have to guess it to get to like I can't. No offense to anyone. I just don't want to pronounce it wrong. But the name of the story is called How Mosquitoes Came to Be. Long ago, there was a giant who loved to kill humans, eat their flesh, and drink their blood. He was especially fond of human hearts. Unless we get rid of this giant, people said, none of us will be left. and they called a council to discuss ways and means. One man said, "I think I know how to kill the monster," and he went to the place where the giant had last been seen. There he lay down and pretended to be dead. Soon the giant came along. Seeing the man lying there, he said,
These humans are making it easy for me. Now I don't even have to catch and kill them. They die right on my trail, probably for fear of me.
The giant touched the body.
Ah, good, he said. This one is still warm and fresh. What a tasty meal he'll make. I can't wait to roast his heart.
The giant flung the man over his shoulder, and the man let his head hang down as if he were dead. Carrying the man home, the giant dropped him in the middle of the floor, right near the fireplace. Then he saw that there was no firewood, and went to get some. As soon as the monster had left, the man got up and grabbed the giant's huge skinning knife. Just then, the giant's son came in, bending low to enter. He was still small as giants go, and the man held the big knife to his throat. "Quick, tell me where's your father's heart. Tell me or I'll slit your throat." The giant's son was scared. He said, "My father's heart is in his left heel." Just then, the giant's left foot appeared in the entrance. The man swiftly plunged the knife into the heel. The monster screamed and fell down dead. Yet the giant still spoke. "Though I'm dead, though you killed me,
I'm forever going to keep on eating you and all the other humans in the world forever."
"That's what you think," said the man. "I'm about to make sure that you never eat anyone again." He cut the giant's body into pieces and burned each one in the fire. Then he took the ashes and threw them into the air for the winds to scatter. Instantly, each of the particles turned into a mosquito. The cloud of ashes became a cloud of mosquitoes, and from their midst the man heard the giant's voice laughing, saying,
"Yes, I'll eat you people until the end of time."
And as the monster spoke, the man felt a sting, and a mosquito started sucking his blood. And then many mosquitoes stung him, and he began to scratch himself. Julian 20, so it is his fault. Yes, it's his fault that we all have to deal with mosquitoes. That seems to be what happened. Um, it is interesting that they do mention the whole him asking where the giant's heart is, because that is another motif that appears a lot of times in folklore across the world. Is the idea of the heart being located elsewhere out of the evil being's body, and that's why he's so powerful. I've heard that. I've seen that in mentioned in another Native American folktale. And often the hero has to find a way to somehow figure out where that heart is in order to finally defeat the monster. Is there any other requests of any other stories from other countries? Um, just mention a country, and I will try to find a story from it, and I will read it for you. Private Maverick, Jewelry Jelly, do you have any requests? Julian 20, Iceland. Um, okay, well, guess I can do it. If anyone else has another request, just mention it, and I will include it in the listing. Let me see. Let me see if I can find one from Iceland. Jewelry Jelly, I need to tap out. Thank you for the story. Oh, no problem, Jewelry Jelly. I'm just glad to see you here. It really, really made me quite happy to see you. And come back anytime to the study. You are most welcome. Okay, let me see. Okay. Okay. So this story is from Iceland, and it is called father of 18 elves. On a farm one summer, it happened that everybody was out in the fields except the mistress herself, who stayed at home to mind the house with her son, who was 3 or 4 years old. This boy had grown and thriven well up to this time. He was talking already, and was intelligent, and seemed a most promising child. Private Maverick, I'd suggest Divine Comedy, but I think that's going to be one long tale. Oh, it is that's a stream in itself. That is a very 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 large book. Oh, I kind of phased out for a second there. I do have a copy of Divine Comedy. I could turn that into a reading stream in future. I might, Julian 20, you should do that one. I will do that one probably as a reading stream in future. But I'm not going to do it as part of this short story one. It is far, far, far too long, incredibly wordy, and I would have to do numerous streams just to cover it. Or was I? Now, as the woman had various chores to do besides minding her child, she had to turn her back on him for a little while and go down to a stream near the house to wash some churns. She left him in the doorway, and there is nothing to tell, until she came back after a brief while. As soon as she spoke to him, he shrieked and howled in a more vicious and ugly way than she ever expected, for up till then he had been a very placid child, affectionate and likable. But now all she got was squealing and shrieks. This went on for some time. The child never spoke one word, but was so terribly wilful and moody that the woman did not know what to do about the change in him. Moreover, he stopped growing, and began to look quite like an imbecile. The mother was very upset over it all, and she decided to go and see a neighbor of hers, who was thought to be a wise woman, and to know a great deal, and she tells her troubles. The neighbor questions her closely, asking how long it is since the child began to be so unmanageable, and how she thought the change had begun. The mother tells her just what had happened. When this wise neighbor had heard this whole story, she says, "Don't you think, my dear, that the child is a changeling? It's my opinion that he was exchanged while you left him alone in the doorway." "I don't know," said the mother. "Can't you teach me some way to get at the truth?" "So I can," says the other. "You must leave the child by himself some time, and arrange for something really extraordinary to happen in front of him, and then he will say something when he sees there is no one nearby. But you must listen secretly to know what he says, and if the boy's seem would ah, if the boy's words seem at all odd or suspicious, whip him unmercifully until something happens." With this, they broke off their talk, and the mother thanked her neighbor, for her good advice, and went home. As soon as she gets back, she sets down a tiny pot in the middle of the kitchen floor. Then she takes several broom handles and ties them end to end until the top end is poking right up the kitchen chimney, and to the bottom end she ties the porridge stirring stick, and this she sets upright in the little pot. As soon as she had rigged up this contraption in the kitchen, she fetched the child in and left him alone there. Then she left the room, but stood listening outside, where she could peep in through the crack of the door. She had not been long gone when she sees the child start waddling round and round the pot with the porridge stick in it, and studying it carefully. And in the end, the child says, "I'm old enough now, as my whiskers show, and I'm a child with 18 children of my own in Elfland, and yet never in my life have I seen so long a pole in so small a pot." At that the woman runs back in with a good birch, seizes the changeling, and beats him long and unmercifully,
and then he howls almost horribly. When she had been whipping him for some while, she sees a woman who was a stranger in her coming in the kitchen with a little boy in her arms, and a sweet, pretty child he is. This stranger gives the child a loving look, and says to the mother, "We don't act fairly by one another. I cuddle your child, but you beat my husband." And saying this, she put down this child, the housewife's own son, and leaves him there. But she takes her old man off with her, and the two of them disappear. But the boy grew up with his own mother, and turned out a fine man. Oh wow. Yes, in Iceland they have quite the culture of involving elves and the like. In fact, I believe there's still some laws that protect certain lands, which may be haunted by elf elf people. I may be mistaken, of course. Oh dear. Private Maverick, do you have any country that you want to hear a story from? Yulian 20, interesting. Yes, it's very interesting. I think I have the energy to do one more story. Okay. My choice. No, no, I still want you viewers to choose. Private Maverick hasn't made a choice yet. I want to hear what he would like to hear. Just name a country and I will try and read a story from it. If it helps, the books I have so far are I have a book of folklore around the world, I have one of Native American folklore, I have one of Swedish folklore, and one of Irish folklore, and I have one of Japanese folklore, which I haven't read an entry from yet. Where is this? Where's this? What if that one story's in here? Hmm. Yulian 20. Well, do classic Japanese then. Well, I'll look for one then. See if I can find a good one. Let me see. Yulian 20, the 100 stories. No, I am not going to do the 100 stories. I am. For those who are curious and watching this stream, the 100 stories is it's an old tradition in Japan, which involved telling 100 ghost stories. You would have a candle each, and you would put out a candle at the end of each story. And the rumor is that once the last candle is put out, the last 100th story is put out, a demon will appear, which I am not going to risk. I am no fool. Well, I mean, some might call me one, but no, I am no fool. Let me see.
Hold on a second. I apologize for the little pauses. I am having to go through the pages. Okay, so this story is called The Fox's Ball. A healer and his woman medium was once called to get rid of the spirit that was making someone ill. The spirit declared through the medium that it was a fox. I didn't mean to put a curse on anyone, it said. I only came because I thought you might have something good to eat. You didn't have to shut me up like this. The medium drew from the fold at the breast of her robe a little white ball. Foxes often have one, and began tossing it in the air and catching it. The people present thought the ball pretty enough, but they were sure the medium had hidden it in her robe beforehand to trick them. One among them, a brave young man, waited for the medium to toss the ball into the air again, then quickly stuck out his hand, caught the ball, and popped it into the front of his own robe. Confound you, snapped the fox. Give me back my ball. The man ignored its pleas, till finally it said tearfully, all right, you've got the ball, but you don't know how to keep it. It won't be any good to you. For me, it's a terrible loss, I tell you. If you don't give it back, I'll be your enemy forever. If you do give it back, though, I'll stick to you like a protector god. The young man decided the whole thing was a waste of time. So you'll protect me? He asked. Of course I will. Creatures like me never tell lies. uh, if you know anything about Kitsune. And we always repay a debt of gratitude. Will the guardian spirit who caught you vouch for you now? Listen, guardian spirit, cried the fox. I swear I'll protect him if he gives me back my ball. The man took the ball out and returned it to the woman, which made the fox very happy. Next, the healer dismissed the spirit, and the fox left. The people seized the medium immediately, before she could get up, and searched her. The ball was not on her. She really had been possessed. Excuse me. Some time later, the man was on his way home after dark from a visit to the great temple at Uzumasa. When he reached the Oten gate, he became afraid, for the neighborhood was well known to be dangerous at night. Visions of all the awful things that could happen to him ran through his head. Then he remembered that the fox had sworn to protect him. All alone in the darkness, he called, Fox! Fox! A series of sharp barks rang out in answer, and in a moment the fox was before him. You did keep your word, Fox, he said. I'm touched. You see, I'm afraid to go through this area, and I want you to stay with me. Well, that's very unusual for Kitsune, but I guess with some cases Kitsunes can be quite honorable. The fox seemed to understand. It went ahead, looking carefully all around, and avoiding the usual path, while the man followed. Eventually it stopped, arched its back, and moved forward again, only with the lightest steps, glancing about even more cautiously than before. The man tiptoed. He soon caught the sound of human voices, and a glimpse of human shapes moving just beyond a fence. Through the gloom he spied a large group of armed men. They seemed to be talking something over, and shortly he gathered what it was. They were discussing where to commit their next robbery. The fox had led him this way, a way no ordinary person would know, just because the bandits would not be looking for a traveler to pass so close. The fox disappeared once he was safely by, and he reached home without further difficulty. The fox stayed faithfully with him, and often rescued him again. More and more touched by its fidelity, he was very glad indeed that he had had the good sense
to return that ball. Well, that was a very nice story involving a very nice kitsune. Kitsunes are usually tricksters in Japanese folklore and mythology. They are shapeshifters often, and there's a wide variety of kitsune that are categorized, which I will not go through because I do not know every single version of kitsune. You were probably all well aware that some kitsune are said to have 9 tails, and those are some of the most powerful ones. And that version has often appeared in numerous um, tales and numerous popular forms of culture, coming from all things from Pokemon to film to I could go on and on with the list. Private Maverick, but in fox form they're cute and fuzzy. Um, it depends on the fox. There are some stories of kitsune who are very wrathful and very vicious. Some are quite kind, some are tricksters, some are very, very not kind. Let's put it that way. Private Maverick, did you have any stories you wanted to hear? I just want to give you a fair chance if you want to hear anything. Anything from Spain? Do you want a long tail or a short tail from Spain? A short one. Let's see if I can find a short one from Spain. I don't have a lot actually. Let's see. Here's one. So this one is it's a medium length one, and it's a ghost story. This one's from Spain, requested by Private Maverick, and it's called "The Tinker and the Ghost." On the wide plain, not far from the city of Toledo, there once stood a great gray castle. For many years before this story begins, no one had dwelt there, because the castle was haunted. There was no living soul within its walls, and yet on almost every night in the year, a thin, sad voice moaned and wept and wailed through the huge empty rooms. And on All Hallows Eve a ghostly light appeared in the chimney, a light that flared and died and flared again, against the dark sky. Learned doctors and brave adventurers had tried to exorcise the ghost, and the next morning they had been found in the great hall of the castle, sitting lifeless before the empty fireplace. Now, one day in late October, they came to the little village that nestled around the castle walls a brave and jolly tinker, whose name was Esteban. And while he sat in the marketplace mending the pots and pans, the good wives told him about the haunted castle. It was All Hallows Eve, they said, and if he would wait until the nightfall, he could see the strange ghostly light flare up from the chimney. He might, if he dared go near enough, hear the thin, sad voice echo through the silent rooms. "If I dare," Esteban repeated scornfully. "You must know, good wives, that I, Esteban, fear nothing, neither ghost nor human. I will gladly sleep in the castle tonight,
and keep this dismal spirit company. Oh no. The good wives looked at him in amusement. Did Esteban know that if he succeeded in banishing the ghost, the owner of the castle would give him 1,000 gold relays? Esteban chuckled. If that was how matters stood, he would go to the castle at nightfall and do his best to get rid of the thing that haunted it. But he was a man who liked plenty to eat and drink and a fire to keep him company. They must bring to him a load of tied wood. I'm not going to use the word they use in the story. I know what the word means, but I'd rather not say it. A side of bacon, a flask of wine, a dozen fresh eggs, and a frying pan. This the good wives gladly did, and as the dust fell, Esteban loaded these things on the donkey's back and set out for the castle. And you may be very sure that not one of the village people went very far along the way with him. It was a dark night with a chill wind blowing and a hint of rain in the air. Esteban unsaddled his donkey and set him to graze on the short grass of the deserted courtyard. Then he carried his foot and his flute. You can tell I'm getting tired. Then he carried his food and his wood into the great hall. It was dark as pitch there. Bats beat their soft wings in his face, and the air felt cold and musty. He lost no time in piling some of his wood in one corner of the huge stone fireplace and in lighting them. As the red and gold flames leapt up the chimney, Esteban rubbed his hands. Then he settled himself comfortably on the hearth. That is the thing to keep off both cold and fear, he said. Carefully slicing some bacon, he laid it in the pan and set it over the flames. How good it smelled, and how cheerful the sound of its crisp sizzling. He had just lifted his flask to take a deep drink of the good wine, when down the chimney there came a voice, a thin, sad voice, and "Oh me!" it wailed. "Oh me, oh me!" Esteban swallowed the wine and set the flask carefully down beside him. "Not a very cheerful greeting, my friend," he said, as he moved the bacon on the pan so that it would be equally brown in all its parts, "but bearable enough to a man who is used to the braying of his donkey." And "Oh me, oh," sobbed the voice, "oh me, oh me." Esteban lifted the bacon carefully from the hot fat and laid it on a bit of brown paper to drain. Then he broke an egg into the frying pan. As he gently soaked the pan so that the edges of his egg should be crisp and brown and the yolk soft, the voice came again, only this time it was shrill and frightened. "Look out below!" it crawled. "I'm falling!" "All right," answered Esteban. "Only don't fall into the frying pan." With that there was a thump, and there on the hearth lay a man's leg. It was a good leg enough, and was clothed in the half of a pair of brown corduroy trousers. Esteban ate his egg, a piece of bacon, and drank again from the flask of wine. The wind howled around the castle, and the rain beat against the windows. Then, "Look out below!" cried the voice sharply. "I'm falling!" There was a thump, and on the hearth there lay a second leg, just like the first. Esteban moved it away from the fire and piled on more wood. Then he warmed the fat in the frying pan and broke into it a second egg. And then, "Look out below!" roared the voice, and now it was no longer thin but strong and lusty. "Look out below! I'm falling!" "Fall away," Esteban answered cheerfully. "Only don't spill my egg." There was a thump, heavier than the first two, and on the hearth there lay a trunk. It was clothed in a blue shirt and a brown corduroy coat. Esteban was eating his third egg and the last of the cooked bacon when the voice called again, and down fell first one arm and then the other. Now, thought Esteban, as he put the frying pan on the fire and began to cook more bacon, now there is only the head. I confess that I am rather curious to see the head.
And look out below,
Thundered the voice,
I'm falling, falling.
and down the chimney there came tumbling a head. It was a good head enough, with thick black hair, a long black beard, and dark eyes that looked a little strained and anxious. Esteban's bacon was only half cooked. Nevertheless, he removed the pan from the fire and laid it on the hearth. And it is a good thing that he did, because before his eyes the parts of the body joined together, and a living man, or his ghost, stood before him. And that was a sight that might have startled Esteban into burning his fingers with the bacon fat. Good evening, said Esteban. Will you have an egg and a bit of bacon?
No, I want no food,
The ghost answered.
but I will tell you this right here and now. You are the only man out of all those who have come to the castle to stay here until I could get my body together again. The others died of sheer fright before I was half finished.
That is because they did not have sense enough to bring food and fire with them, Esteban replied coolly, and he turned back to his frying pan.
Wait a minute,
Pleaded the ghost.
if you will help me a bit more, you will save my soul and get me into the kingdom of heaven. Out in the courtyard, under a cypress tree, there are buried 3 bags. One of copper coins, one of silver coins, one of gold coins. I stole them from some thieves and brought them here to the castle to hide. But no sooner did I have them buried than the thieves overtook me, murdered me, and cut my body into pieces. But they did not find the coins. Now you come with me and dig them up. Give the copper coins to the church, the silver coins to the poor, and keep the gold coins for yourself. Then I will be expedited my sins and can go to the kingdom of heaven.
This suited Esteban, so he went out into the courtyard with the ghost, and you should have heard how the donkey brayed when he saw them. When they reached the cypress tree in the corner of the courtyard,
Dig,
said the ghost. Dig yourself, answered Esteban. So the ghost dug, and after a time the 3 bags of money appeared.
now, will you promise to do just what I asked you to do?
Asked the ghost. Yes, I promise, Esteban answered.
Then,
Said the ghost,
strip my garments from me.
This Esteban did, and instantly the ghost disappeared, leaving his clothes lying there on the short grass of the courtyard. It went straight up to heaven and knocked on the gate. St. Peter opened it, and when the spirit explained that he had expedited his sins, gave him a cordial welcome. Esteban carried the coins into the great hall of the castle, fried and ate another egg, and then went peacefully to sleep before the fire. The next morning, when the village people came to carry away Esteban's body, they found him making an omelet out of the last of the fresh eggs. Are you alive? They gasped. I am, Esteban answered, and the food and the wood lasted through very nicely. Now I will go to the owner of the castle and collect my 1,000 gold relays. The ghost has gone for good and all. You will find his clothes lying out in the courtyard. And before their astonished eyes, he loaded the bags of coins on the donkey's back and departed. First he collected the 1,000 gold relays from the grateful lord of the castle. Then he returned to Toledo, gave the copper coins to the cura of his church, and faithfully distributed the silver ones among the poor. And on the 1,000 relays and the golden coins, he lived in idleness and great contentment for many years. Oh, oh my goodness. quite the tale. Esteban was quite the brave man. And I'm sure some of you have heard this, have heard a ghost story similar of corpses falling down from chimneys. They have been recorded in other places as well. I think it's time to close out this stream for the evening. Before I go, I will tell one last story to close it out. As I said before, this will be the last stream for a little bit. I will be taking a little bit of a break, hopefully a short one. I don't know yet. It depends on some issues outside of my control. Um, when I come back, I do have plans for another gaming stream. We will continue with Secret of Monkey Island. There'll be more stream reading streams in the future, some more short story reading streams, and maybe some book readings. I still have my lore debut to do. That is in the future as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of you there. So before we go for the night, to close out our evening shorts tale, I will read a short story from Sweden. It's one of my favorite folk tales of all time, and it is called That Was the End of the Tale. A boy walking along a road found a locked chest. After he'd walked a while longer, he found a key. "What if it fits?" said the boy. He placed the chest on a rock and put the key in the keyhole. "Crack!" it said, and the chest opened. Guess what was in the chest? A tail. And if the tail had been any longer, then so would this tail. Good night, good morning, and farewell, you scholars.